Capcom is not your friend. Some of you might be rolling your eyes and asking if I also think the sky is blue, but it's actually a realization that I've come to rather recently thanks to the abysmal launch of Monster Hunter Wilds. You might call me naive for not seeing it earlier, and I'll admit, there is some truth to that. On one hand, I am not a lifelong Capcom fan, so it wasn't as easy to see the insidious greed festering within from an outsider's perspective. I have never played any of the Street Fighter games, I've only ever seen footage of Resident Evil, and Mega Man was always a title on my gaming bucket list that I still haven't gotten around to. On the other hand, they are a modern multi-million-dollar gaming corporation, and Dragon's Dogma 2 exists. So really, what did I expect? Well, I expected them to be better, to not mangle the launch of the latest game in one of their most successful and beloved franchises. I love Monster Hunter. I have well over 1,000 hours in World and still come back to it just to feel the impact of a well-timed TCS or the rush of finishing off a Fatalis with one cart left. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and when I saw the trailer for Wilds, I immediately got a first-class ticket to the hype train. I genuinely thought of Capcom like a good friend coming to my door once again to deliver an exquisite 5-star meal, something that would blow World out of the water because that's how it was advertised. In reality though, the PC launch of Monster Hunter Wilds was so atrocious, it was like being snapped out of a hypnotic trance and seeing the world for what it really was. Less sunshine and rainbows, and more corporate greed and rushing to meet deadlines resulting in massive hits to product quality. You see, my journey with Monster Hunter began with World sometime in 2020, after the launch of the Iceborne expansion. I was completely new to the series, and almost immediately fell in love with the deep, methodical gameplay and the immersive, interactive world the Monster Hunter team had created. When I first played the game, the numerous microtransactions and the gameplay alterations made to casualize the experience weren't signs of the series going in a bad direction, they were just sort of there. I had no prior experience nor expectations for the series, so I couldn't possibly comment on whether these features or lack thereof were a concerning sign of things to come. But then I went back and played previous titles, and realized that while there is a lot to love about the 5th generation of games, some things felt missing. Things that I believe would enhance the gameplay of the new-gen games if implemented. So then the question became, why did they remove or simplify these features from the older games? And worryingly, the answer I kept ending up with was, to make the game appeal to a wider audience. Which is basically corporate speak for how can we squeeze as much money out of this as humanly possible. Don't get me wrong, the old generation of games have their fair share of antiquated mechanics and questionable design. I can readily admit that without some of the changes that made World easier and more approachable, I probably wouldn't even know Monster Hunter existed, and for that, I am incredibly grateful. I'm certainly happy that more people like me can get into the series thanks to a lowered barrier of entry, but I can also see how Capcom's attempt to modernize the franchise has had a negative impact on the games. There is a deeper discussion to be had about the direction of the series, about how its identity has changed over the years and how the survival simulation aspects have been de-emphasized in favor of faster-paced, more intricate combat, and whether or not this is a good thing. But that is a conversation for a different video. When I say negative impact, I mean the more objectively bad decisions Capcom has made for the 5th generation of games and beyond, or at least the ones we've got so far. Nothing shows this more, in my opinion, than the fact that the games now use a live service model to drip-feed players new content and limited time events, and of course the veritable mountain of microtransactions, which you can argue don't impact gameplay and are mostly limited to gestures, chat stickers, pendants, and room/character customization. However, World also added a few pieces of layered armor which you could only obtain as purchasable DLC. While these cosmetics don't impact gameplay in a direct sense, fashion hunting, aka hunting monsters for the appearance of their weapons and armor, is a staple of Monster Hunter's endgame, and you have always been able to obtain every armor or weapon design just by playing the game. Now having to put down more money just to get all the possible armor pieces seemed like a dire sign of things to come. But most players could brush this off. I know I did, as there are hundreds of armor designs in the game already, and the DLC ones aren't particularly appealing, so who cares, right? At least it's not like they made some awesome looking paid DLC weapons with unique sounds and animations. Yeah, when they released the DLC Layered Weapons in Monster Hunter Rise, the community was in a bit of an uproar, especially older players. Adding a few DLC armor sets could fly somewhat under the radar, but DLC weapons? This was a step too far, even if they were purely cosmetic. Many community members, to their credit, voiced their disappointment with the addition, but the damage was already done. A precedent had now been set for this to occur again in the future, and it wouldn't surprise me if we do see something like this again. And if you thought the microtransactions in World were bad, Rise turns it up to 11. On top of all the things you can buy as DLC in World, you can now also buy alternate voices for your hunter, layered armor that turns your character into an existing NPC, layered armor for your cat, layered armor for your dog, Oi, Josuke! Layered armor for your owl? Furry bait? Furry bait. All this is kind of bad, but it's pretty standard fare for modern live service games, and the argument could always be made that it's just optional cosmetics that don't impact gameplay, though in response I'd like them to clarify how these overpriced DLCs benefit anyone besides Capcom themselves. And then there was the launch of Rise itself, which shipped in a woefully unfinished state. They had an honestly valid excuse of COVID messing up their development schedule, a factor that, when combined with the Switch exclusive release, meant that most people who played Rise on launch, which wasn't that many, were willing to partially forgive the half-baked experience.
Unfortunately, I think the game falters in a couple of ways, mostly through the ease of progression and the lack of accomplishment for making it to the end. It feels like an incomplete experience, and that's not because of the title updates. World felt like a complete experience and offered us extra content. Rise feels like it was rushed out and missing something that should have been in from the get-go. Seriously, I bet if they waited until the end of April to release the game, it would have felt like the whole package. That being said, I had a lot of fun with this game despite the hiccups. Rise has so much potential, and even if this was a rocky start, I feel like it's understandable considering the climate of our world at the moment with a global pandemic going on, and I honestly only see the final product becoming better over time with these updates and the inevitable expansion.
When the game later came out on PC, they did a phenomenal job with the port, and then proceeded to further exceed themselves with a beautifully handcrafted expansion which elevated the game in just about every way. Seriously, if you haven't played Sunbreak, do yourself a favor and play it. Praise aside, I think most of us can agree that even though Capcom made up for their mistakes somewhat, they should have delayed the game in the first place instead of shipping an unfinished product, regardless of how brightly that product shines today. This pre-discussion about Rise and DLCs has just been the appetizer for the main course. They are the small cracks that betray the inevitable collapse, the signs of Capcom giving into the infamous and all too common AAA greed. But I never thought they would stoop to the low that was Wilds at launch. Real quick though, I just want to clarify one thing. The directors at Capcom and the Monster Hunter team are not one and the same. I believe that the passion the MH team has for the series is genuine, and that they truly wish to create the best experience for us, the players. They have shown time and time again that they are willing to listen to player feedback and improve the games to the best of their ability, It is all but confirmed that Wilds' release was rushed to meet the sales expectations at the end of the Japanese fiscal year, meaning that it's highly likely that the team was pressured by Capcom to get the game out regardless of how finished it was. However, I am also certain that the MH team still has some culpability in making sure the game is in the best state it can possibly be in before launch. If Wilds needed more time in the oven, and it undeniably did, the team should have been more communicative and attempted to get the game delayed. Now, obviously, I am not part of the Monster Hunter team. I have no clue if they actually did try to talk to their higher-ups about delaying the game, only to get shut down, or if they really thought the game was in an acceptable state. All I know is that they released an unfinished game at full price and offered nothing but a sad, have you guys tried updating your drivers message when people realized it ran like ass. So, what exactly were the issues with Wilds at launch? Well, for the PC version at least, there was the Gammoth in the room, optimization. Texture streaming, CPU bottlenecking, crappy upscaling blurrier than the line between influencer and sociopath, texture pops, FPS drops, hard crash to desktop. You name it, this PC port had it, though I'm tempted to say has instead, because despite multiple performance patches having come out since then, the game still, at times, can chug harder than your alcoholic uncle on Thanksgiving. Then there are the issues with the content itself. The barely cohesive plot, a distinctive lack of optional quests, a half-baked endgame where you get to grind one or maybe two monsters over and over, a non-replayable final boss, and, most egregiously of all, no Hunter's Hub. A feature that has been in practically every single mainline and portable entry since the first game, and a shining beacon representing the defining selling point of these games, arguably even more so than the monsters themselves. Cooperative multiplayer. And it's just not there. I have several other grievances with the game, like the removal of tracking and a general lack of difficulty, but I'm saving these topics for a longer, more nuanced video. Capcom was absolutely aware of the state of the game, yet they still decided to release it like this. They had built up my trust with World and Rise, only to shatter it with this travesty of a launch. You can criticize me for trusting them in the first place, you can even say that I'm way too emotionally attached to this video game franchise, but I still can't help but feel betrayed. The game I had been looking forward to, the game I had stayed up until 4 AM watching trailers for, the game that was representing the next brilliant step in the evolution of my favorite franchise ever, that game wasn't real. And in its place was a broken, disappointing mess wearing the face of someone I used to respect. I don't want to come off as a hater, blind to anything genuinely good this game has to offer. There is much about this game I do actually like a lot, like the monster designs, the overall quality of the roster, the sprawling locales, and the music. Oh my god, the music! I am absolutely not saying that you can't have fun with Wilds, or that you're a bad person if you aren't bothered by these things. The problem is that the more people defend Capcom's behavior, the more likely they are to continue with these incredibly anti-consumer practices. I'm sure that one day, Wilds will be patched and updated to the point where pretty much all of my complaints will have been addressed. I'm sure that one day, Wilds will become the best Monster Hunter game of all time. But I'm not really interested in that anymore. The thing I want to see now, more than anything else, more than any returning monster or mechanic from an old gen game, I want to see accountability. Capcom has not once apologized for or acknowledged the horrendous state of their game. And no, performance fixes and patching in content that was supposed to be in the game in the first place months after launch does not count. That is simply them making up for the work that was missing in the first place. It's good, and they absolutely should make up that work, but that's not the same as addressing the root problem. This isn't about repairing a product that was broken. This is about making sure they don't continue to sell broken products in the future. I would say we need to make sure that they don't get away with this, but financially, they already have. And I'll admit right now, I was a sucker. I fell for their ruse. I pre-ordered the most expensive version of Monster Hunter Wilds on Steam because I truly thought that Capcom was my friend, and that they deserved all that extra cash, and that they wouldn't betray me like all the other companies. I was wrong, and I feel like an idiot because of it. Also, something very specific I wanted to comment on that came up while I was editing. The Capcom showcase for Wilds' second title update came out a few hours ago, and while I was watching it, something clicked inside my head. People are unusually willing to jump to the game's defense, or more accurately, Capcom's defense, even when they've done some objectively terrible things, as I've discussed in this video. And I think part of the reason for why this happens is that Capcom always places the passionate, hardworking developers up front as a sort of empathic shield. You see these incredibly talented and creative people trying their absolute best to deliver an enjoyable experience, and it immediately forces you to reconsider if the thing they're making truly deserves all the hate it's been getting. Because, look you guys, they also care about the game a lot. And look, they're bringing back that thing you love. Are you sure you don't want to miss out on the latest paid DLC? It's really cool. The cynical side of me is saying that this is a deliberate tactic Capcom is using to counteract the negative reception these games have been getting since, well, World. But I have a feeling that the problems with Wilds are going to be simply too big to bury under a vapid pile of empathy and jingling keys. So, what can we do? What should we do? Well, for me, all I can do now is try to inform others and warn them not to make the same mistake. Don't reify the Capcom cycle. Don't buy any of the paid DLCs or deluxe editions. Don't pre-order. Sail the 7 seas if you must. Every dollar you feed them will encourage them to continue down this path of greed. Never, ever let them forget the disaster that was Monster Hunter Wilds at launch. And as for you, Capcom, this is what I have to say. Trust is a very difficult thing to build. It can often take years of hard work and good behavior before it pays off. And once you're there, all it takes is one mistake for it all to come crashing down. And when that happens, you have 2 choices. The first is to use your words to apologize to the people you wronged, and use your actions to prove that it won't happen again. This way, trust may yet be built again, and people will hold you in a higher regard for acknowledging and fixing your mistakes. The other is to keep betraying the trust of your most loyal followers until their trust runs out. And then, nobody on the planet will ever want to associate with you. I hope you are smart enough to see which path is more profitable, because that is ultimately all you care about. Like I mentioned earlier, I am planning on doing more in-depth videos on Wilds' flaws in the future, so if you're interested in that, or Monster Hunter discussions in general, feel free to leave a like or sub, it's greatly appreciated. And of course, if you disagree or have other thoughts on the video, please do write a comment. I greatly appreciate discussion around these things, as Monster Hunter is one of my favorite franchises ever. Anyway, that's about it for me. Take care.